Hey guys, BMI here today with a tier list update for the new Flame of Lævateinn expansion, which covers the new Fable and anime archetypes. We'll be using the new Shadowverse Evolve master website to help visualize everything, so let's get right into it. First of all, we've got Misme, so this deck is still very strong. It's a tier 1 deck that is very good against aggressive decks in particular, of which there are no shortages of in this expansion. Note that Misme cards are the only cards that can be included in this deck type, so BP03 includes no new additions, so you can just net deck anything from the previous expansion. It still works, it is still good. Next up is Discard Dragon. So this one is a bit more of a meta-dependent call. So for context, in Japan, the Misme deck was not nerfed, and was sort of warping the meta a little bit, and Dragon was good into it, even though Discard Dragon did actually have a nerf, so Shenlong was put to 1. And it was still performing quite well. It's popular with World Championships. And I don't really see any real reason why it wouldn't be good in the English version, apart from potentially if Heroswad is really popular and Uma's not there to counter it. But I think Discard Dragon at the current point in time should still be a tier 1 deck, and is practically the same as it was in the previous expansion. So the first new deck that is in tier 1 is called Heroswad. So this deck is the premier aggro deck of the format. So main game plan is you want to play a lot of 1-cost followers, deplete your hand, and then eventually it will allow you to use Valiant Fencer, which can search for any hero card in your deck, and if you have 2 or less cards in hand, you can evolve it, and it starts really popping off, and you can snowball your board and finish them as early as, say, turn 5 or 6. So a very fast, aggressive deck, unless you're versing something that runs a lot of removal and ways to kind of mitigate the aggressive tempo that you're dishing out. Also note that it's one of the cheaper decks of the format at only 84 USD as of the current time. The main cost associated with the deck is Valiant Fencer. You'll notice that everything else is relatively cheap. So if you're a beginner player and you're just getting into the game, it is super cheap to play Heroswad. I will note, as a disclaimer, that the deck is not good forever. In fact, it has a fairly short lifespan, but for the price you're paying for it and the performance you can get in this expansion, I think it's worth picking up. Speaking of longevity, Egghaven. Now this is also a new deck. It's one of the primary reasons why Alysis is so expensive, but it lasts forever. Well, not forever, but it lasts for like 4 sets. So this is a very good investment if you're looking for a deck that's just going to be good for a very long time and will reward you for learning all the ins and outs of the deck. So the key concept of this deck is that you want to set up your EX zone with your combo, with your Humpty Dumptys, your explosions, and then when you evolve Humpty Dumpty, you explode the entire board, you discard your hand, but you don't care because your combo is already set up in the EX zone. So this deck is actually quite consistent, and it's a mid-range combo-y deck, and the idea is once you kind of stack up the Humpty Dumptys and you stack up the explosions, they start doing kind of 6 damage for only 3 mana, which is extremely good. It does get better in BP04. It gets a new card called Andromeda, so this one kind of removes the main disadvantage of Humpty Dumpty, which is that it nukes your own board as well, so you can start snowballing really crazily. It's a very expensive deck. If you are planning on picking up pieces for it, I do recommend that you use our affiliate link. So every time you purchase a card by using a link from our site, it actually helps support us. There's no downside to you. It's the same price as if you went there by yourself. The only difference is that we get a small cut, which helps us continue running the site. So make sure to pick up your Alysis today, because the price just keeps going up, up, and up. That's Egghaven. Moving on to tier 2 decks. So the first one is Midrange Forest. So this one is a very strong deck. It actually managed to win the World Championship equivalent in Japan. It runs a mini Fable engine, so it doesn't run Alice, but what it does run is Flower Princess. So this card combo is very well with Actress Feria. So the combo is on 3 mana, you play Flower Princess, you play Actress Feria. You can tap the Flower Princess immediately to do 3 damage to an enemy follower. It really makes your aggro matchups a lot better as a result. It also runs Tweedledum and Tweedledee, so this card, when it evolves, it lets you look at the top, I believe it's 4 cards of your deck, and you can reveal 1 play point card from among them and add it to your hand. And so, one play point card, sorry. And then you put the remaining cards in the bottom of your deck, which makes your deck hyper consistent. And the main idea is that you just want to continue being quite aggressive and controlling the board and then eventually finishing off with Silver Bolt, which is your main finisher. It's very hard to play around this because wards do not stop this effect. It's very similar to the previous expansion. The main difference is that it no longer runs tier in this particular list. However, we did look through the Japanese meta, and there are still a number of Japanese lists that run tier, so that's just personal preference on whether or not you want to play it. Moving forward is Lævateinn Sword. So again, this deck had no real changes. The only card that you might consider compared to the previous deck list is Old Man and Old Woman, which has Bane for a 1 PP card, which automatically makes it somewhat decent for any sword deck. But aside from that, it's pretty much the same, and the only reason it's in tier 2 is because Heroswad is just a vastly more popular sword deck, and obviously, you know, you can only bring one deck, right? So people typically bring Heroswad, but I think in terms of power level, it's because only like a tiny bit below Heroswad. So if you already have the deck and you just don't want to invest into hero cards, I think it's perfectly reasonable to continue playing Lævateinn. No real changes. Next is another new deck, so Beauty and the Beast Forest. So again, this does utilize Alysis. So if you already have Alysis, then the rest of the deck is actually pretty cheap to play. So the main concept of this deck is Beauty and the Beast. So when it's in your EX zone and you play it from there, it gains Storm. And it's got Aura. So if you know what Forte does, and you know how hard it is to deal with that, imagine this card with just look at the stat line and the fact that it's got Aura and Storm. So they attack you, and you have to use all your resources to deal with this. So that should already give you an indication as to why this deck is fairly strong. And of course, it runs all the other Fable cards like Humpty Dumpty, Lilac, Flower Princess, Alice, of course. So Woodland Band is also the other Alysis card, which gets your Beauty and the Beast into the EX in the first place. Pretty interesting mid-range kind of, I wouldn't call it a combo deck, but it's a mid-range kind of finishing deck using Beauty and the Beast as the kind of core component. Whether or not you prefer this playstyle or the Silver Bolt one is up to you. This deck did see quite a number of successes in the Japanese meta, so definitely do recommend picking this up, especially if you already have Alice and you want something new to play around with in the Forest craft space. Moving on to tier 3 decks, so we've got Earthright Rune, aka Millie Parfait. So this deck didn't really see that much competitive success in Japan, because Misme is very good into this deck, but it might see a bit more success in the English version. I would recommend playing a lot more of the kind of 6 defense followers if possible, which is Runic Guardian for instance, and also Ancient Alchemist, which is also 6 defense and evolve. So that makes it pretty difficult for Humpty Dumpty to kind of deal with. If you want to see a guide, we've got one on our YouTube channel, so make sure to check that out. But as always, I recommend that you play around with your own ratios. Your metagame might dictate that you play a different build than what's shown here. Okay, moving along, Kaldja Haven. Pretty much the same deck as before. I don't think Control is dead at all. You can play this or Aegis Haven, but essentially it's basically just stall out until you can get Aegis and then ward up with the Guardian Sun and then go from there. The reason it's not played is because Egg Haven is way more popular. It's a more interesting deck because it just came out, and Aegis is, let's face it, Resident Sleeper. But I still think it's a reasonable tier 3 deck. Moving on is Agro Abyss. So again, this is a deck that didn't see play much in Japan because Uma was pretty much broken and it kills every aggro deck. Uma's not as popular in the English version, so you can run aggro. Don't need to talk too much about this. This one's a bit more of an aggro deck, but again, it runs very high value, aggressive cards, and it got a lot of Storm in the late game. So pretty straightforward deck. Nothing particularly interesting to talk about for Agro Abyss. The new deck Control Abyss, however, was made a lot stronger with the addition of Dark Alice. So this one, when it attacks, each opponent discards a card, and it has a recursion effect where every time it dies, it comes back, but it banishes 10 cards from your deck. So it's a bit of a trade-off in that respect. And their finisher is Azazel. So when your opponent's out of cards, boom, drop this guy, drop them to 10 HP, and then finish them off within 2 attacks. It runs a lot of cards to make your opponent discard. If that's the type of playstyle you enjoy, definitely make sure to give this deck a try. Chess Rune. So this deck is another anime archetype, mid-range deck, has a lot of very efficient removal, and Merlin managed to recur both Check and Witchbolt. So the main objective is to play chess followers, then eventually go to Mystic King, evolve it, bring all your chess followers back, and overwhelm your opponent that way. Definitely a fun deck, but very expensive. so watch out for that. Cinderella Sword is the last Fable deck on the tier list, so this is the third and final Fable deck. It utilizes a card called Cinderella, which when it attacks, the opponent's leader, mind you, it gets to bring out another follower from the deck. Basically, the whole concept of this deck is kind of cooperation, so a lot of these cards like Maisie or Young Ogre Hunter Momo, these cards gain additional effects if you have other Fable cards in the field, so you want to manage your board effectively in that manner. Of course, Kiss of the Princess can kind of bypass that when you've got a Princess follower on your field. But overall, I think it's not necessarily the greatest deck, but if you already have Alysis, why not give it a try? Everything else is pretty cheap. And a lot of people already have sword cards, right? So yeah, definitely something that you can try out, especially if you pull the Ultimate Cinderella. It's a fun deck. Moving on, Stormhaven. So I don't have too much of an opinion on this one. I was having a chat with people on Discord. They insisted that I add this to the deck, add this to the kind of decks page and also the tier list. I thought it looked reasonable. It's definitely got some good matchups. It has Storm, right? So decks like Egghaven hypothetically have a bad matchup into this. I could see this being better in the English version given how popular Egghaven is, and Misme being a little bit less popular. So this could be a secret OP, or it could be completely trash, but happy to put it in tier 3 for now, and we'll see how we go. So that basically does it for the tier list video for playing with Lævateinn. I plan to do one more once the meta is a bit more solidified, but I think as a preliminary view, this is probably rather accurate to what we will see at the upcoming competitive events. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to like and subscribe for additional content in the future. And also, if you'd like to support us, please purchase cards from TCG Player using our affiliate link. That's it from me today. Thank you all for watching. See you next time.